Welcome, friends, to Brother Owl's Garden. I'm very happy to see you here, and I'm even more delighted to welcome back for a second appearance. It's been 2 years. A dear friend of mine, a wonderful man, a published author, a news media celebrity, a blogger extraordinaire. He's all over the internet. He's a wonderful guy and a great friend. Coming to us from Miami, Florida, by way of Iceland. Here he is, Matt Sweetwood. Thank you for being here, Matt.
It's my pleasure, brother Brian. Just so you know, when I was on 2 years ago, I had a hair just like yours. I'm just saying.
Uh, I was gonna ask you about that. I said
We
this.
start with a lie. We start with a lie. I always like to start a media segment with a lie. It's always a good policy, right? In today's world, you start with a lie, you fit right in. So we're good.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right on par. But
Right.
Matt, it's a delight to have you back, and it's an honor as well. Um, Most of my viewers at this point have figured out that we don't shy away from a topic that is a little dicey just because it might be a little dicey or a little difficult or a little bit, not TikTok-y. So, we don't do all that stuff here. I have grabbed
Yeah.
the bull by the horns with a couple of difficult topics, and here is another one that we're doing today. And
Hmm.
I'm going to just turn the platform over to you and invite our viewers to please stay with us and view to the end, because this is something that everybody really needs to become aware of and plugged into, because this is a global, certainly a national and even international epidemic of the highest order. Matt, take it away.
Yeah. Well, you know, men have a rough ride. We talk about being in the age of women. It's women's time. You've seen, I think Hillary coined that phrase. It's the era or time of women. um, and I think that's true, but unfortunately it's true in the sense that men are on the decline worldwide. I know here in the United States, I mean, you just have to talk to a few bright, intelligent women and they'll tell you there's no real men left. And the focus is always on blaming the men for this happening. And the reality is that our culture has placed men in a counter biological, counter genomic place there. I just coined the word, where they're being subrogated in a way that their psyches are being permanently damaged. And the end result of that psyches being permanent damage, combined with essentially no place for them to express or find relief, results in an extremely high rate of life ending for men at an early age. Obviously, we're referring to the big S word. And men, I think I read the stat that says women attempt suicide more. You can see my buddy over there.
Well, that's
She's
okay. I'm being surrounded and flanked by
right.
9 cats as we speak, and
Yeah,
hopefully they're all asleep.
I couldn't leave her out there because she would scratch at the door. She
Yeah,
wants to participate. She wants to
same here.
participate in this, and she's
Same
a
here.
darling. So I think, as I was saying, women attempt suicide more than men, but men are successful a lot more frequently. And as a result, we have a worldwide epidemic. And I think that it's only going to get worse. I think COVID, I think when you look at the college admission rates here in this country, you look at the incarceration rates, you look at the life expectancy, you look at hopelessness for young men, you look at the mass shootings, which get a lot of public attention. I know this is a whole different topic. You look at, even more so than the mass shootings, you look at the gang violence in the cities, which takes the lives of so many people of color, young men of color. This is clearly an epidemic, and I don't see any process in the world or any movement in the world to lessen this. So I believe that we're headed to a very, very bad time. It's going to get worse before it gets better. And I just, have prayers for, men that are suffering out there. And hopefully they can figure a way to not take the ultimate end to their lives.
Yeah, I mean, Matt, as a prelude, you basically just hit every bullet point and summed it up in a nutshell. Suicide is an absolute, you know, real pandemic, at epidemic of suicide right now. The statistics are that 80% of suicides are men.
Mhm.
And we're not being sexist in any way for anybody that's going to be vehemently woke and triggered and all that in saying that women attempt suicide and men commit suicide, because statistically that is a mathematical fact. This
Yeah.
is not to discount in any way whatsoever the women. The topic is the epidemic of suicide, but the overwhelming slant to that is men. And we have to ask ourselves why. And I know that men like you and I can see very clearly a lot of the reasons. It's not one thing at all, but it's a conglomeration, a nebula of many things. And the first time I had you on with a very terrible Skype connection 2 years ago,
Yeah.
we
We've
we
improved.
we yeah, we touched on some of that, which is the infernal and incessant bashing and institutionalized hatred of men, and the whole society, whether all of us are aware of it or not, whether all of us like it or not, the entire society has begun to demonstrate the gross, obvious symptoms and consequences of that, misandry, and that's where we're at as step one. Males are being crushed for being men, for being males. Toxic masculinity, all of this stuff, and there are some traits on the peripherals of masculindom. There's a word I just coined that are not good, but they are symptoms of unwellness and imbalance of that
Yeah,
person.
I think really the to me the issue is when it always comes down to money, right? And I'm sorry to really to sort of make this into a coarse, simplistic discussion. But if men were succeeding at a greater rate in society, this problem would dissipate, right? We can talk about male toxicity or toxic male or whatever, and men not being allowed to act like men and all of those things. But ultimately, it comes down to, I believe it is genetically wired in men to hunt and find success. And when they're told from a young age that that's not the goal anymore, or they're put in a disadvantaged position, because we know there's reverse racism now. There is less opportunity for men to succeed. Women are given advantages in many aspects of society. So when you have a situation where young men feel like there's no hope for them to actually fulfill their genetic potential, you have basically an incurable situation. It doesn't really matter what the social policy is. It doesn't really matter what happens to them. If a man can't find success, he's going to be in a very depressed state. I don't care how you code it. I don't care what you do, but ultimately that's it. So if men don't have jobs, they can't provide. They can't have families and provide. Men today don't even see the point in having a family. They have no way of supporting it. They know that if they get divorced, women are going to destroy them. There was a tweet yesterday that talked about that. It sort of approached the male issue from the following. It was a tweet that said something to the effect, if you're over 40 and you haven't been married yet and have a family, you should give it up. Because by the time you find a woman who's not a gold, these are not my words, I'm just quoting it, that you can't find a woman who's not a gold digger, who's not crazy, who's not drinking all the time. You do all of that, you go through all of that, it's going to be very difficult for you. And so, and if you marry a woman when you're early in your age and it goes wrong, you're going to be destroyed. So whether that's totally true or not is not the point. That is the perception of men out there. And so men find themselves in a position where They are too scared to engage in family and traditional life. They can't afford to do it. They don't see a path to success. They're being shunned by society. They're being called toxic. As you point out, they can't act like men. They find no place to go, and you can't even talk to anybody about it. If you do, you're considered weak, or you just, it's not.
Yeah.
This is something that, I don't mean, I want to stay on my point, but this is something that's really important. I want to talk about why men don't seek help, but they don't have an outlet for help. And this perfect storm is just going to result in more and more men ending their life early. It's as simple as that. And I just, it's just such a shame. It's just such a painful, it's a painful way our society has become. And I think it actually, in some respects, stems back to the original thing, the joke I made, is that there's just, everybody's lying to everybody. Nobody wants to face this problem. If you talk to a politician or people in charge, or even the clergy who influence people, or you just speak to anybody, it's very hard to get a straight answer on why this is happening. So men are being told it's their fault when it's not really their fault. It's a societal problem. It's a systemic problem. The problem is because they're toxic, or they're failure, or they're not smart enough, or they're not trying enough, or whatever the reason is, or they've oppressed people for years, and this is their punishment. So I don't really see a good result in this until we start having, like, the conversation we're having. This society has this truthful conversation and actually has an incentive to fix this. I'll comment that I know women that I talk to who think like the new era is women. They're like, how is that going to work? Right? In order to have children, you actually need a man. In order to raise a child, it's better to have two people raising a child. If we want this civilization to continue, both men and women have to be strong. And that sounds like something that should be the sort of like all lives matter kind of thing. That's one of those things where if we want civilization to succeed and prosper, both men and women, okay, have to be doing well. It's as simple as that. And unless we take that tact and stop trying to instill equity into the situation where we are this false narrative of where we have to do things to prop one side up to try to guarantee an equal outcome, I think that we're going to continue along this path of an increased rate of male suicide.
Yeah, because that whole equity narrative is nothing but gender affirmative action.
That's right.
Um,
That's right. It's
in
discrimination.
this
It's
context.
actually you're not even saying it's strong enough. It's actually just outright discrimination.
Yeah,
The most famous African American in this country in history, Martin Luther King. I mean, his most powerful statement is, "We don't judge people by the color of their skin." I will extend that to by their sex, by their height, by their weight, by anything that's on the exterior. We judge them by the content of their character and how badly they want something in their life, how hard they're willing to work. That's how we should judge people. It's as simple as that.
well, Matt, we're firing in all directions here, but we're hitting a lot of good targets, and all of them matter. I'm going to call you out on one thing, brother. I'm going to call you out on one thing. You said that one of the factors is reverse racism. There's no such thing as reverse racism, because racism does not have a standard origin and a standard direction outward.
Direction, of course.
Racism is racism. And even if you
100%.
flip it upside down, it's racism. So yeah, but I just want to straighten that out. But the things that you're pointing out are this nebula of causes that are each individually huge issues. And what if we were to package them up into one box? We might say that men are being oppressed and made to feel hopeless, helpless, and useless. And if anybody thinks that that's a good course for them and for us all, you're really delusional. And as I said before, the signs, well, the chickens are coming home to roost. All the symptoms and signs of that being the narrative for, let's say, the past 2 to 3 decades or so in particular, it's all coming home. And I would just like to use the phrase, how's that working out for you? How's that working out for you? To crush the necks of men, um, and we could get into the whole feminism thing, third wave feminism. Women have basically gone overboard to the point where they've effectively become men in the sense of the roles that men used to occupy and uphold, which you mentioned, our innate instinct is the hunting and providing and protecting, and I'll also say breeding as well. Men do have a tendency to want to continue their line of DNA, and they instinctively look for a younger, healthy, fit woman in which to do that together. Women, on the other hand, are instinctively attracted to stronger men who demonstrate a better ability to protect and provide for their common children, etc. But yeah, the uselessness and ergo the meaning and purpose of the human aspect of being a male has been obliterated. We're well past the point where it's been crushed. It's not just being threatened, it's wrecked. And yes, society has changed. So many women have completely bought the narrative, and I'm going to catch a lot of heat for saying this, but we don't need men, and men are useless, and girl power and slay queen and all that stuff. How's that working out for you? Are you genuinely at peace within yourself, in the community, in the society, in the species, with that
I want to
kind
take
of
off
a
on that. There's a dynamic that I noticed back in my days when I was living in New Jersey, in that I was in a town, a very affluent town, one of the most affluent towns, top school system, um, and there was a very high divorce rate in that town. And it was very ugly divorce. And you would think that this would be a town that would not have a very high divorce rate because the people have money. So therefore they have comfortable existence. They can support their children. They live close to New York City. There's culture. There's just a lot of, they're educated, quite frankly, both the men and women educated, in many cases, Ivy League educated. I joke, when one of my daughters applied to the University of Pennsylvania when she left high school, they one of the criteria for getting into the university supposedly is called legacy, right? Where
Mhm.
you have a parent that has gone to the school that gives you a supposedly a better chance of getting into the school. And she applied, and there were like 32 kids that applied with legacy at the same time from our high school, meaning there were 32 parents who lived in town, had a child that age, and went to one of the top Ivy League schools in the country. So I'm just giving you a feel. The home, it had the highest income level of something. It's a crazy town. And what I saw in this town was the women who are Ivy educated, in many cases, are very educated, were at the forefront of this women power. Women don't have to take on traditional roles. And I watched them emasculate their husbands. I watched it. Now, I was a single dad, so I could sort of watch it from a distance a little bit. And the end result was, and this, I think, and I may take a little bit of heat for this, is that women do this to men. They put men in this subservient position, and then they lose attraction to them. They don't even understand it. But when the men become weakened, they themselves lose attraction to the men and don't want them anymore. But they don't understand what's happened. I've seen this over
No,
and
this
over
that
and over.
that's an absolute rock solid point, and you can sum it up in this statement: men who can be emasculated and humiliated by their female partner um, demonstrate a complete lack of self-respect, which of course then the woman is not going to confer any respect to him, and women don't stay with men they don't respect. Period.
Even though they kind of they kind of did it, okay? They did it to them. And this is a situation where certainly men, you are responsible for how you behave. You are responsible for allowing this to happen. Nobody can abuse you unless you allow it. I'm be careful how I make that statement, but in general, I mean, if you're walking out there, you're allowing it, you're staying there.
Well, no, you could say it this way. We teach people how to treat us by
Right.
demonstrating what is acceptable, by
Yeah, thank you.
allowing boundaries or ignoring them. And in a relationship, people respect when boundaries are, noted, set,
That's right.
and also
And
kept.
yeah, yeah, and I think this is a case of men for a very long time have been taught to just shut up. That's what they're supposed to do. This is the way they're supposed to be. They've been toxic for all of this time, and they believe this, and the news has fed this. I mean, until people really understand that the news, all of it is 100% fake, and to try to be high information humans where they can actually try to ascertain information and understand what goes on. And I'm not being left or right with that. Fox News is fake, CNN is fake, the New York Times is fake, the Washington Post is fake. I mean, there's basically 99% of any news you get is just total narrative. It is not real news, it's narrative, it's a position. And if you're being told this over and over again, you're ultimately brainwashed. And men are being, as I made in my initial point, are being told to act counter instinctively. And when you are told to act counter instinctively, you start to become extremely unhappy. Extremely unhappy.
It's not just, and again, here we are. I'm going to catch heat for saying this. So, okay, catch heat. Men are not only oppressed and crushed by the narrative, they're not only emasculated by the overzealous feminine aspect, but they are also made effeminate and cuckish. There, I'm going to catch a lot of heat for that. But that's what you see. And you know what? Even the militant wing of the third wave feminists, I'm sorry, we are programmed biologically to prefer certain traits, and soft, mushy pushover is not attractive.
Yeah, and I think the other side of the coin too is that women are being told not to sexualize themselves. And what I mean by that, I don't mean that in a sort of a nasty way. I mean that not too long ago, women had the concept that they wanted to look sexy when they would go out into the world. Now, in many cases, that's viewed as a negative. It's viewed as subjugating themselves. And as a result, the dynamic, the hunt and chase between men and women is diminished. And staying on our topic, when men don't lose the desire, women aren't as attractive, women aren't sexualizing themselves, they sort of weaken as hunters, they weaken in their drive. And I think that is actually a major cause of the noted scientific fact of drop in testosterone in men. People think, oh, maybe it's additives in the food, maybe it's this, and maybe it is all of that. But I actually think a huge component of that, a huge component is the reducing of sexualization in our society, the positive sexualization. I'm not talking about exploitation in any way, shape, or form. That's obviously a big no-go in any way. Nobody exploited.
You might even be referring to dimorphism in a sense, men being trending towards being manly and women trending towards being women. There, I'm going to get crucified by the woke mob of the the interwebs.
But I think that this is a major contributor to this, and I think that once men, and I've said this a couple of times in different ways, once men lose their mojo or lose their interest. I just saw, actually, it just came out a couple of days ago. There was a study which showed that 30% of men under 30 are not in a relationship, not having sex, not doing any of those things. I mean, how can that really be healthy? That can't be healthy. That's not going to lead to a good place as they age. I mean, to me, that's a terrible kind of circumstance.
It's actually the numbers. We cannot concretely verify an exact figure, but I've researched this lately too. It's about 2/3 of, let's just say, eligible aged men within that range of adult men checked out, not even interested in dating. Nope, done. just done. About
Yeah, the
2/3.
cost is too high to them. If you think of the pitfalls of dating, you think of it, you can end up getting a woman pregnant. You will be then responsible for that child. And I'm not saying being responsible is a bad thing. Let's clarify. You'll be responsible for that woman and that child the rest of your life.
Mhm.
The woman can accuse you of something.
Yeah.
She, in many men's minds, if you end up married to her, she could wreck you. It costs money to do this, and we're in this heavy inflationary time where men are earning less and less money. So
Yeah.
you're in a situation where you start to see what are the advantages and what are the disadvantages. And, quite frankly, the internet is looking like a much safer alternative.
Yeah. Not only internet, but like AI and bots and all that. And
Yeah, okay. I meant internet's my big
yeah,
scope of
right,
all
right.
of this stuff.
But no, that's another facet. I think it was like roughly 50 years ago, the proportion of male to female students in university was roughly 25 or 30% female, and now it is 1/3. Excuse me, it is 2/3 and rapidly increasing. Men are just dropping out of the whole system of institutions and meaning and purpose that they used to have. And yeah, it's rendering, like in Japan, what they say, the herbivores. Are you familiar with that term, the herbivores? Um, Voluntarily celibate, completely out of the social and dating circles, just opt out of all, no interest whatsoever. And these are men in their 20s. There's also such an absolute epidemic of people dying alone in Japan. I wish I could remember the word. Hikikimori, hikokimori. People who are just dying. What's happening is this epidemic of predominantly male suicide. I guess that's another male privilege, right? This overwhelmingly tilted epidemic of mostly male suicide is itself a glaring, blinking symptom of the loneliness and emptiness and meaninglessness and purposelessness that the past few decades narrative and social agenda and re-engineering of our society has produced. And again, women are also committing suicide as well, but it is 80% men. And it is symptomatic of societal collapse, because all of the mores and institutions and, yes, traditions of past society have been wrecked, deliberately wrecked.
I mean,
Here we are.
I think that we would be remiss in this discussion without really focusing on young education. And I really want to address that college statistic that you bring up. If you look at education, and I'll talk specifically in the United States, the educational system has become entirely woke. And as a result, the kinds of crap that is being taught to the children is weakening all of the children, men and women. But I will tell you that, having put 5 children through a pretty sophisticated, what's considered high-end public school system here in the States, what I will tell you, I noticed the following, and of course it's been verified, it's not just my personal observation, is that curriculums in some areas, for example, like mathematics, have been accelerated. So myself, just give you my credential. I have a master's degree in mathematics from the University of Pennsylvania, and I have a PhD in computer science. So I feel somewhat like, if you voir dire me on this topic, I probably can feel comfortable talking about math curriculum. And what I
Whereas I
noticed,
can count to potato.
yeah, right. So what I noticed was that when my kids were taking 7th grade math or 9th grade math, They were doing the kind of math that I was doing in 11th and 12th grade. They were in a top school, and so the math curriculum and many of the curriculums, particularly for the best students, those AP classes and so on, have been accelerated. Maybe that sounds good, but here is the issue with that, is that a biological fact that boys mature more slowly than women. So than girls, physiologically, intellectually, and so on. It's just a fact. It's just a biological fact. So by accelerating the curriculum, you accelerate the curriculum to challenge women to push a little bit, but it goes well beyond the capability of men at their physiological age, boys. So as a result, boys fail more in the school system. And I have living proof of that. I have 5 kids, 3 girls, 2 boys. The girls through the school system did great. Ended up going to Northwestern, George Washington's Elliott School of International Affairs. Youngest daughter graduated Pace University, summa cum laude, first in her class. Did great in this through the school system. My boys, my middle son, my middle child's younger son failed out, went to OK college, basically failed out of college. My oldest son went to college, he dropped out, didn't want to do it. They struggled through high school. Eventually, as they matured and with some parental love and guidance and punches, we eventually got them all back into school. And now that one that failed out of college has an MBA from Baruch College, and the other one graduated Columbia, went back to Columbia later on. So for me, that specific example is very representative of the actual facts of this accelerated curriculum. The teaching of garbage is actually placing men, both men and women, but in particular men, at a huge disadvantage, which explains the college acceptance rate, which then explains the ultimate incarceration rate, which ultimately explains a lot of things that are happening that are bad for men as they go through life. Getting back to my original point was making it much more difficult for men to achieve success. And success being a breadwinner, making money, achieving fame, fortune, or whatever that means, earning a living. And it's simply, in many cases, driven by poor school systems, accelerated curriculums, and woke ideology.
Okay. But Matt, all of that can't be true because gender is a social construct. We are all identical NPCs,
right,
with exactly the same traits and tendencies and talents and abilities and strong points and weak points. We are all the exact same thing. Yeah, okay, that's obvious sarcasm. Matt,
I think that if you went to the most...
Go ahead.
I think everybody knows that that's not true. I just think it's politically expedient for people's causes or money-making reasons for them to espouse this.
I think there is a certain percentage that has struggled and succeeded really hard in convincing themselves that that is true. I don't know that everybody thinks that's not true. But the point you've made about the mathematics courses being, accelerated, all that is something I had never known about. I had never even thought about that. That is massively valid because that is skewing. That is deliberately skewing. That's saying, forget this half of the student body. We're only going to focus on fast tracking that half. And you guys just roll off in the ditch and get out of the way. And you could flip.
Right. So then when you get to college, so even wait, I'm just going to add one more thing to that, because it's even more subtle than that. Because even if the boys are able to do well, the girls are still doing better, right? I don't want to make it sound like it's designed to fail the boys out, because that's not necessarily the case. But the girls are the ones in the AP classes and the ones excelling, and then ultimately get into the best colleges and have the best admissions credentials. And that's, so sometimes maybe I phrased it in a way that was very dramatic, overly dramatic, but it's still sometimes that subtle thing. So when you look at and then you have the colleges engaging in affirmative action, which thank God has just been struck down by the US Supreme Court. But for the longest time, they've been engaging in affirmative action where they'll prefer one candidate, maybe a female candidate over a male candidate, and so on. So I think that this is, if not at the heart of the issue, is one of the 2 or 3 fundamental factors driving our topic today, which is why men are ending their lives prematurely.
There's also another social aspect, another cause that we haven't addressed yet. And it gives equal blame to both of the genders, okay? An increasing and astonishing percentage of children, of which many are boys, are raised by single women. Now, you raised your 5 children as a single male. However, you know that that is the minority of what normally happens, because the court system is so incredibly biased in favor of custody of children going to women. And I'm told that it's starting to even out, but I don't know if that's panning out in practice or not. But when, let's just, again, let's set aside the girl children for just a moment and focus on the men, because the topic is the epidemic of male suicide. This huge percentage of men who are being raised by only one parent, who is the female, this is not the ideal nuclear situation for children to be raised in, with the complementary and harmonious cooperation of the 2-parent household. I'm going to be absolutely burned at the stake again for saying that, but Dems to facts. And why?
I'm going to take some of the heat with you. I'm going to state this is more like a it's not a deep statistic in the sense of proving your point, but it's a dramatic statistic. They looked at the last, and because this is a big issue, and you know, I am a big Second Amendment, US Second Amendment guy, so I'm sort of pointing to the other side in a second. There was a period, and this is about, I'm giving information that's about a year or a year and a half, 2 years old. They looked at the last 27 mass shootings. You know, people who walk into a school, walk into a movie theater, walk into a shopping mall and open fire, that kind of shooting, which is only a tiny little percentage of the shootings and deaths that go on. And all the big ones are in the inner city where thousands are killed, wounded and killed. So they looked at it, and of like the 27 most recent mass shootings, 26 of those young men came from families without fathers.
Okay, so Dems the facts. And this is not to say, oh, those mothers are failures. We're not saying that. We're saying one of the parents is not there. One parent is not present and being a guarding, protecting, providing, nurturing, cooperative, harmonious, complementary aspect of the duality of mother and father as parents in the typical traditional sense, biological sense. And so those men are gone. And we can talk about why they're gone until we're blue in the face too, but they're gone. And that leaves, in most cases, the children with the mother. And so society is leaning more towards the influence of being raised in that situation. And there would be equal skewed results if it was always the other way too. But the fact that people just don't stay together. First of all, marriage is imminently extinct.
Yeah, I think it's more societally deeper than that, because if you do a success rate, an income rate, incarceration rate versus intact family, you're going to find culturally, let's say families from India, families from Asia, who tend to have a much higher intact family rate, have a much, much higher success rate, employment rate, lower incarceration rate, all of those things, poverty rate. Where you look at, for example, people of color in this country, I believe runs at an 80% single parent rate, single mom. Like 80% of Black children in America are born to single parent families. I don't think I'm overstating. I think it's like 79%. And then you look at the income level, the incarceration rate the death rate, the early death rate from homicide, you look at, they're all related. Of course, this is not a topic that the race baiters and the warmongers like to talk about, but this is really it, this family structure, this traditional education structure, staying in school. Like, if you just take the basic facts, you keep your family together, you educate your children properly, you teach them some sense of morality, and you teach them to work hard, the likelihood of success for them is huge. So when you start to take out these components or mess with these components, you end up with a disaster in society and ultimately this higher suicide rate that we're seeing in men. It's ultimately, I just summed it up in just the most simple terms. And we've spent a lot of time on this conversation, and maybe we should wrap up with, like, what do we do to fix it, right? What can you do to actually fix this?
Before we move on to that, two other things I wanted to say, because you mentioned about the mass shootings and all that, and homicides. The suicide rate in the United States is literally double the homicide rate, and you hear hardly a peep. Everything is about, and homicide is horrendous and evil and horrible and all that, and there's nothing good about it. But do you realize that the suicide rate is double the homicide rate in the United States alone?
And that goes with the fact that, and I'm just going to sort of address the issue that you said, give you another stat. According to Pew Research, and this is from about 2018, 19, 20, 25% of single parent families in this country are headed by men. I'm just letting you know. And that's higher than any place in the world, higher than any place.
I didn't know that it was even that high. And the other stat
in the United States, every place else, it's a fraction of that.
Yeah. The other stat I just wanted to make sure I slipped in so that I don't forget it, is that for every suicide that is committed, there are 20 that are attempted.
I didn't know that. Unbelievable. Because once somebody attempts suicide, you never fully recover from that, of course. Of course.
Every single day in the United States, approximately 105 or more men commit suicide.
It's unbelievable.
So, those are the facts, and none of this is pleasant. And it is sad and regrettable that it's that way, but neither of us is apologizing for stating facts about this very difficult topic. And Matt, you mentioned before, men are not really as inclined as women to reach out for help. That's true. You're seen as a weak and soft and all that.
I think we're just not genetically structured like that to share our feelings. I just think that's really really it.
It's not typically a male forte. And the other thing is, so there's that lack of a proclivity to reach out, but there's also the societal reaction. If you do, you're kind of often quietly thought weak and emasculated and all that kind of stuff. But there are men right now who are watching, and women as well, who are watching our conversation, and they may be aching for an answer to, so what do I do? I've been thinking about ending my life. Self-deletion. I've been thinking about it a lot. I can't seem to get it out of my head. I've begun to run out of reasons to oppose the idea. What does someone, in particular men, but someone, do when they are at that? Because I can tell you, I know two people right now that are struggling with this issue right now constantly. And I also know another man, wonderful, good man, who did commit suicide. And I won't speak too much about the case, other than to tell you that, I have to say this sensitively, when he was found in a position where he was trying to change his mind and get out of what he had caused.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah. So what do men do?
I think that men have to take charge and try to force us back to a more traditional existence. I think that's really what it is. No one is going to fix this problem except men themselves. I can give you this answer, and we need to elect this, and we need to do this. Ultimately, when you take this 30,000-foot view, there needs to be more conversations like this, and we need to take positive action. So I need to raise my kids in a traditional manner, teach them the proper things, and it's ultimately the responsibility of men to finally say, I'm mad as hell. What's that from the famous movie? I'm mad as hell, and I'm not going to take it anymore. You know, from the movie Network, which actually won an Oscar over Rocky and should never have. But I'm mad as hell, and I'm not going to take it anymore, and I'm going to be who I am. And I think if men do that in enough numbers and enough mass, I think that's going to happen. Anything else is just a band-aid. It's not really going to.
Yeah.
It's not going to.
We're at the point, like the theme of
Yeah.
that old movie, Die Hard.
Yeah.
We're kind of there as men. We need to reclaim the wisdom and inherent meaningfulness and purpose of the role of men in order to help steer this thing back before it becomes exponentially epidemic, which unfortunately you and I
Right.
both agree it is heading that way.
And there
Matt
needs to be,
Sweetwood.
our leaders need to have public conversation just
Yeah.
like we are. They need to have the balls to do this.
Yeah, this can't be a taboo subject. We're even a little bit concerned that we hope we don't get blocked or suppressed on YouTube for having this conversation.
That's right.
But here it is, and we're doing it anyway. Everybody, thank you so much. Matt Sweetwood, thank you for everything that you've shared, brother, and keep up the good fight. And I respect you and appreciate and value so much what you've shared of yourself with all of our viewers today. Thank you, brother.
And Brian, I really appreciate giving the opportunity to have the conversation that needs to happen. You're a very brave man, and you know I love you.
Mutual, brother. Thank you.